Welcome to the Big Movement Podcast. If you're ready to create results and make huge strides in your business, finances, personal development, and health, then you're in the right place. Pushing past excuses and powering through procrastination can be a challenge alone. Here, you'll get the support, tools, and knowledge you need to get to the level you desire in your business and life. Let's get started with your host, Byron Ingram.
And welcome to the Big Movement Podcast today. And today we have a special guest. We have Stacee Magee, who is known as being called a genius, and is used to actually being a patent inventor and owned a company that was valued in millions. And she's created a platform called Girl Genius Inventors, where she's made it her job to create geniuses by helping others find their inner genius and talent. So let's welcome our genius guest today, Stacee Magee. So welcome, Stacee.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here with you.
Oh, well, glad you're excited. So tell us a little bit about your background, because it's not very often you hear someone saying, I'm a genius.
Well, after it kind of sounds a little conceited. You're like, I'm a genius. But, after people say it to you so many times, you're like, well, maybe they might actually have something here.
Right.
So I don't know exactly where to start. I guess I'll start at the beginning and end at the end.
That always works.
I know, right? So just to give a little bit of my background, I started out life as an artist, professional artist, and started my first business doing art. And I'm kind of a serial entrepreneur, and I started painting windows because that's what my mom did to make money. And I was like, I'm going to do this. And I didn't like it. And I was, following that family business thing, and I didn't like it. And I just started kind of trying to figure out what I was going to do and what I was going to be. And I fell into the cloth diaper industry, which is a really weird little niche. If you think about it, you're like, what, diapers? Because it's not something that you're like, I'm going to go to college and I'm going to make diapers. Right. You don't do that. So we were actually in college, and we actually have now 7 kids. At the time, I think we had 4 or 5, and college kids, married couple, we were kind of broke. And I was like, oh, I'm going to make these cloth diapers. And so I started making them for my kids, and people were like, that's a really genius way to come up with a diaper because it's so much different than what's available. You should sell these. And I was like, oh, okay. And then I started selling them, and my husband's like, you know what, you really need to patent those. And I said, well, okay. I started looking into patents. Patents are very expensive. So I wrote my own patents, got issued 2 patents, kept working on the business, added new products, and that company, I actually still am a part of that company, and it was recently valued at over $2.2 million. So during the process of that company, I had a lot of people come up to me, oh, it's really cool that you have your own business, and you're so smart, and that's so cool, and I wish I could do something like that, but I don't have any talents. I'm not as smart as you. I can't do that. There's just no way. And especially one of my friends, who actually inspired Girl Genius for me, had said the same thing. She goes, I don't have any talents. I can't do what you do. And I started thinking, I'm like, no, this is not true. Everyone has a talent and ability, but through our lives, something's happened where a teacher or a parent or someone has told us that we can't do what our talent is, we can't do what our passion is, and that we have to go along a certain path, and that we're not talented. And so we start believing it. And so Girl Genius evolved from me wanting to show people that you have something inside of you, and that it's possible to use whatever you have to create something genius.
Oh, excellent. I mean, that's so powerful because, you hit on a couple things there. Well, one is that you have that many kids. Like, oh, wow.
Yeah.
You don't have a reality TV show? What's going on here?
I actually was approached to do one, and I said no. I was like, sorry. I really felt like that would kind of be bad for my family. So I declined.
Probably the best thing ever.
Yeah.
Like when you look at the other reality TV shows with large families, they haven't turned out so well for the families.
No, they haven't. And I really think that that's from your entire life being an open book. And, every family needs to have a little privacy and a few secrets. And,
right.
I couldn't imagine having, every little bit of my life nitpicked about. So, yeah.
Right. Like, I just wanted to go to the store. We have to make it epic. We have to go for the ratings.
Yeah, exactly. It's not just like, okay, we're going to run to the grocery store. No, it's this big giant production. And I just couldn't imagine the stress that those people that do those shows are under. And it's already stressful enough having 7 kids. I don't need to add to my chaos. So.
Right. Exactly. And I can see the inspiration for creating diapers, because that in itself, I can only imagine the diaper bill. Going to the grocery store, like, okay, you have 2 carts full of diapers. All right, we're set this week. No food, just diapers. And
yeah. Yeah, well, and cloth diapers are 10% of the cost of disposables, so it was kind of a no-brainer for us. When you have 7 kids, you really look for any creative way that you can find to save money.
right.
And so for us, cloth diapers was part of that creativity thing. So yeah, it worked out.
Right. Oh, definitely. I mean, it makes a big difference there. And you hit upon something which is really powerful about people coming up to you and seeing that they didn't have any special talents, because that mindset, that programming. And you think about how many times people had someone say to them what they could or could not do. Like, oh, you're going to be amazing. And others, oh, you just suck. And people believe that. They take on that identity.
Yeah. And it's really, really easy to let other people's doubts in us become the way that we feel about ourselves.
Right.
And I've even been in that position where, my friends, I'll tell them my new ideas and they're like, you really think that's going to work? And I'm like, no, it really will. Watch, let me show you. And I always have to kind of like prove myself to them or prove them wrong. Just like, hey, look, no, it's possible. And it's funny because even myself, people, oh, can you do that? And then sometimes I'll start thinking, oh, maybe I can't. And then I'm like, no, I got to do this. I'm going to try it. And, sometimes my ideas don't work out and it's okay. And I just move on to the next one.
Right. And that's so important that you just try it, because you never know what's going to work. I think in the world we live in, because we have this tendency to only focus in on people's wins instead of, well, how many times did they try before that? You look at, I always use the reference of Thomas Edison with the light bulb. You look at how many ways he found not to invent the light bulb.
Yes. Yeah. And it is so true. And it's amazing that people only look at the results and not the process.
Right.
And yeah, I mean, there's so many instances. I think pretty much every invention has failures. I think, in fact, I would venture to say that if you haven't failed at something, you're not trying. And you're not trying hard enough and you're not doing the right thing, because I almost tell people this a lot, and people look at me a little strange when I say this, but I'm like, I want you to fail. And people are like, you want me to fail? What is wrong with you? That's so mean. And I'm like, I'm not being mean. When you fail, it means that you've tried. And when you try, it means you've learned one way not to do it. Like you said, 100 ways not to make the light bulb. And then you'll learn the next time, okay, I know that doesn't work. Let's put that aside and let's try something else. And eventually you'll find something that works. And then you're like, oh, this is it. And that's kind of like your genius moment. And I think everyone has the ability inside them to be a genius. That we're all born with stuff. It's just we've been told so many times that we can't. And so we give up too easy.
Right, and that's so critical. It reminds me of like some different case studies that have been done over the years. Where, for example, like if you look at let's say some of the school systems out there where you would typically think in some neighborhoods, oh, these are economically disadvantaged children. Oh, they're never going to amount to much or whatever. But then you change the environment. You give them the resources they need. You change that belief system, and you take students that go from barely scraping a C average to being straight A students because you changed their mindset. You gave them the possibility that they can do it.
That's so absolutely true. And I actually have a funny little story. Well, I don't know, it's a funny story, but in high school, I went to boarding school. It was on a working ranch out here in Arizona. I mean, we literally had cattle drives through the middle of school.
Wow.
But this school had a scholarship program for kids in Harlem. And so every year they'd pick, 4, 5, 6 kids, and they would bring them from Harlem. And they'd bring them from really, really bad places and bad situations. And these kids would go to having straight A's. A lot of my friends, they now own businesses. One, got a college basketball scholarships. And it's so true that if you change the environment, that anything is really possible. And I saw that with, firsthand with my friends who came from that, economically disadvantaged place where they thought, oh, this is only the way life is. And then you're put in a different place and you realize there's so many other possibilities and your potential is so much greater than you've been told your whole life.
Right. Exactly. And that's the key to it. When we look at what we're doing, you think about on a daily basis how many times people will say to them something even simple like, oh, I'm such a klutz. And then what happens after a while? They become a klutz.
Yeah. And it's so true. And it's something that actually I do with my kids is, they'll show me something they've done at school. Or they'll show me a picture they've drawn. I'm like, oh, that's so amazing. I am so excited that you shared that with me. Tell me about what you did. And I try not to project an opinion on them, but rather let them tell me about it and then go from there and be like, oh, that's so cool. And then we talk about it and I try to build them up at what they're doing rather than giving them a preconceived notion of, oh, that's not good enough or don't draw or don't read or whatever they're doing. So...
Right. And that's so important because those are those developmental years when you have that belief and they keep wanting to get better and better versus if someone says, oh my gosh, what tragedy did you befall upon to that piece of paper? They're going to stop.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's really funny because as I was growing up, my parents never told me I couldn't do anything. If I had a talent or, like my art talent, as soon as they found out that I was interested in art, they gave me a whole box of art supplies. And when they saw that I was interested in writing, they gave me notebooks and pens and papers and supported that. And so I was really, really lucky. And then, I see other people who have had the complete opposite where, for instance, like my daughter's boyfriend, his parents have told him, you're not able to follow what your dreams are. You have to go to college. You have to do this. You have to do everything in the little ducks in a row order, or you're never going to be successful. And I just sat him down and they probably hated me for it. And I said, you don't have to do that. You don't have to go to college. You do what you need to do to follow what you feel inside you is what you want to do. Otherwise, you're going to be miserable the rest of your life. And he was like, wow, no one has ever told me that. And I was like, really?
Right.
So yeah, it's just really mind blowing how many people are told their whole lives. And I think that it's really important, as adults that, if we've been told these things, that we work through them and tell ourselves that we have the ability to move beyond that and that we really do have talents. And sometimes we have to recognize the ones that we were born with. Sometimes we develop new ones, and they're not always easy to recognize, but they're there and we all have them.
Right, exactly. And at the end of the day, when you think about the talents, it's all based on that exposure, the environment that we grew up in, the things that we see like, ooh, that looks interesting. If you think about it, let's just say that someone grows up in a household that's filled with musicians. There's a strong likelihood of their children having an affinity for music because that's their environment. The same thing, let's say someone's a scientist and let's say, they have kids and, they're really just doing amazing things in the science world. Guess what? Most likely their kids are going to do something in that fashion. Now, granted, there's always that one who does something completely different, but
Yeah, and that's okay. That
right,
if you don't follow that family thing. And I think, I mean, even as adults, we can get stuck into this thing where, we tell ourselves, well, I can't do that right now. I can't, that's too hard. I can't change what I'm doing. When in reality, you can do anything that you want to do. You're not
right,
limited to it. So,
right, exactly. And then, of course, there was a little while ago, there was the individual, that some person who jumped out of a plane without a parachute. So that completely debunked the myth that you can't jump out of a plane and, well, make it to the ground safely.
I actually hadn't heard about that. That sounds
Really
wild.
Oh, it blew my mind. Like, well, that's gutsy.
Gutsy, yeah. And I think that's sometimes it's almost like what you have to do is say,
Right,
I'm going to jump, and I may not have a parachute, and I'm going to just try it anyways. And I mean, I'm not going to recommend people jump out without a parachute, but
right,
at the same time, it is metaphorically kind of what we're doing is, it's like when I started this Girl Genius thing, I'm like, well, I already have this company, and I actually have two other companies. I didn't even mention the third one I have. And, what am I doing, and what am I even thinking starting a third one? But I really felt like it was a message that I had to get out to people. And I'm like, well, I'm just going to jump, and we'll see what happens. And if it works, it works. And if it doesn't, I tried, and I'll try something else after. So.
right. And that's the most important thing, is that you try and try again, because if it doesn't work, oh, so what? Get up, do it again.
Yeah, yeah. And it's really easy to get stuck if we have a failure or something that doesn't work out. It's really easy to get stuck in that and say, it didn't work out and I don't want to try again. I don't want to put myself out there again. And that is really like the only time that you're a true failure is that when you don't try again. When you say,
Right.
that's it, I'm too scared to try again. And, I just tell people, just keep trying and try again. And when I designed my first cloth diaper, and it seems like an easy thing to design, but when you're designing to fit someone's body, it's not as easy as it seems. And I went through probably 10 or 15 prototypes before I had it just the way that I wanted.
Right.
It's kind of like when you write a paper, you don't write just one draft. You rewrite it, you edit it, you do spell checks, and you would never, if you were in school, you would never have turned in a first draft of a paper unless you're really late on something. But you always
Right.
take that time to go through the process. So.
Right, exactly. Although, but since you mentioned like turning in a paper, without editing, there was this one instance where, I just neglected to write down that, oh, I had an English paper due. Then it kind of occurred to be like, oh crap, I have an English paper due tomorrow. So I wrote it that evening, and because at the time I finished, I realized I'm tired. If I try to edit this thing, it's not going to be the best work. So I did one thing, spell check, just to make sure nothing obvious was there.
Yeah.
And that was the only paper I did not get an A on. That one I got a B plus on. So like, okay, well, note to self, edit it. I don't like bees.
Yeah, exactly. And we learn from those experiences, and sometimes they're really painful ones where you're like, oh, this is not fun and it's not pleasant. But, when you have those experiences, they ingrain themselves in your mind. Okay, I know what to do. And we're all kind of like animals, where they learn, certain behaviors through experiences. And so, like my cat knows when I open the fridge, there's a good chance that it's going to get a snack out of the fridge. So it comes and sits right by me, and we become conditioned. And, we learn how to react to things, and sometimes they're positive and sometimes they're negative.
Right. Exactly. And that's important. You just have to go with the experiences. And, when you think about the experiences, because, you look at everything you're doing, how are you taking someone's experience and kind of shining a light bulb on saying, you could do something with that and turn it into a business. You can turn it into a product. How are you going about that?
Well, you really have to start at the core, which is with your talents. And I've learned this too, is that if you just try to start a business to make money, it's not always going to work. Or if it does work, you're going to easily get really, really burnt out, and you're going to get tired of it, and you're not going to want to do it anymore. But and I actually learned this. I was interviewing one of my friends who is a composer, and he said that he loved what he did so much that he would do it for free. And that's how you know that you're on the right path, because you love it so much you would do it for free. And when you have that kind of love and passion for something, it reflects in your product and it reflects in what you do. So when someone wants to say, okay, I want to start a business, I want to come up with ideas, we start with, developing your talents. And to develop the talents, we need to discover them, because we really don't recognize the talents we have, or we've forgotten them, or someone may have told us that talent won't work. So we go through a little personal evaluation with everyone, and I look at their strengths and their abilities. And I even tell them, go talk to your family and friends, and talk to people with an outside perspective. Can't talk today, sorry. With an outside perspective, and ask them the talents that they see in you, because you may not be noticing the talents that you have, but other people will look at you and say, oh yeah, you're really, really talented at doing XYZ. And it kind of gives you a jumping off point to move on through that. And then you just continue going through that, and you ask yourself, does this make me feel amazing? Does it give me a sense of accomplishment? And, we start setting goals and looking at what you do and what your talents do and what is unique to that person. And some of those talents are not always creative talents. So we look at talents sometimes and people think, well, creative talent is, an artist, a singer, someone who gardens or writes a book or composes songs. Someone who's really good like that. And if you don't have those kind of talents, that you're not talented. But there's so many other talents, such as emotional talents, that can really translate into doing something amazing. Some people are really positive. Some people are really determined. Some people have good patience. Someone who has humor would make a perfect comedian. Some people are good at inspiring confidence in others, and so they become great motivational speakers. Some people are really cheerful, and so they would make a great therapist because they would be able to cheer people up. And so we just kind of look at and evaluate the talents that people have, because I think that, pardon me, if what you want is to have an amazing talent and a genius ability, that you must be really willing to spend time and effort to develop the talent that you're looking for.
Right. And you mentioned something which I think people discount or they don't think about. We usually think of talents like, oh, it's something intellectual in nature. Like, oh, this person's amazing at math or at science or something along those lines. But how often do you hear someone stating like, oh, they're with an emotional talent? If they're humor, you think of the kids say that they're the typical class clown who's always cracking jokes and things. But look at what happens. Mm-hmm. You have someone saying, stop being disruptive. Things just squash that talent instead of how do you embrace it and nurture it?
Yes, exactly. And I think that it's really important to remember that, just because you don't have what you've been taught as a talent doesn't mean that you don't have talents. And, if you look at things at this level, there's so many ways to quantify and qualify a scientific or a mathematical genius. They have yet to discover a way to quantify an artistic or an emotional genius. And they don't have the ability to test that or to quantify that. So if you're going through and, like you said, you have this child that is a class clown and you're telling him to sit down and shut up, you're literally crushing that part of the genius that's inside of him.
Right. Exactly. And then when you think about the ways that are present to quantify it, there's still flaws in the system. But I remember a really good friend of mine that her dad was a carpenter. And he did it for many, many years. He could walk into a room and immediately tell you the volume of the room, all the dimensions, you name it. Mm-hmm. But if you were to put that same information on a piece of paper in terms of a test, he'd fail it in an instant.
Yeah. And, earlier we were talking about Thomas Edison. Thomas Edison was sent home with a letter that his teacher said he was, I believe they called it addled at the time, which was basically like, your kid is too stupid to teach. I'm sending him home because I don't want to be his teacher anymore. That's literally what the teacher told his mom. And instead of his mom, telling his son, you got sent home because you're stupid, she said, oh, your teacher said that you're so smart that he sent you home so I could teach you. But, the point of that is that, his genius, they weren't able to quantify it. I mean, Einstein, I believe he had a horrible time with math. Horrible. Right. And sometimes there's this box of conventional learning, and it's kind of sad that in the U.S. they try to fit everybody in this box. And if you don't fit into that box, they tell you that you're not smart enough. Well, it's quite often the people that don't fit into the box that are the ones that are truly genius.
Right.
So, and they just get broken down so much because they've been told, oh no, you don't have a genius because you're not fitting into society's box. And, I was one of those people. I don't always fit into the box. I actually didn't even complete high school. My parents ended up getting a divorce. And so over the battle, nobody wanted to pay for my boarding school. So I came home to live with my parents, and I was told, well, all your credits and all of your, I was an honor student, all of this is going to waste because the school won't release your credits. So we're starting you as a freshman, your junior, at the end of your junior year. And I was like, I don't like that. And so I went out and I just took the GED and tested out of school. And because I was just, I'm not going to, I was like, not going to start over again. Sorry, I'm not going to fit into your box. And then I decided to go take college classes, but I never took the full courses. I only took the classes that I liked, and the rest of it I was like, I don't like this box. And so I just kind of decided, hey, I'm going to move on. And I had so many people along the way say, you can't do that. That's not the way things are done. And I'm like, just watch me. I'll do it. And, sometimes I didn't do as good as I thought I would. And other times I really excelled at stuff. And I found that I do the best at, going against the box and going outside the box. So...
Right. And here's the thing to think about. You look at the definition of fitting in a box, you think of how many innovations have happened today from people who if you're to look at the traditional definition of success of you have to go to school, you have to go to college, all this, they dropped out of college to follow their passion. We wouldn't have Microsoft Windows if, we relied on someone to just go through and finish college.
Yeah, and it's true. And I'd almost venture to say, and, I might get a lot of flack for this, but unless you're going to be a doctor or a lawyer, something that really needs school, that, I have even told my kids this, I don't think that you have to always go to college, because when you go through there, it's the same thing as grade school and high school and middle school, is that there's a box and that you have to fit into that box. And it's the same things pretty much.
Right.
So I really honestly feel, like you have to learn the basics, obviously, but that moving outside of that box and learning through experience is how innovation comes.
Right. It's my philosophy when it comes to college these days. It's really straightforward that not everybody in the world needs to go to college. You look at all the roles in society. There's some people like, no, if you're passionate about crafts and trades, go that route so you can become a master at doing that one thing. But then otherwise, look at something that you're passionate about. Like, oh, you really want to dive deep on it. But here's the key thing when you're looking at going to college. It's not necessarily about the knowledge you will obtain. It's about the peer group you can meet, because that's where it can make all the difference.
Yeah.
You think about it. If you look at certain schools, how many leaders of industry have come out of certain schools? So there's a certain group of people that's there. So if someone's really thinking, well, why should I go to college? Well, if you want to go and run in these particular circles, go there because that's where they're at. Not just like, well, I just want to learn basket weaving. No, watch an online video for that.
Yeah, exactly. And it's true. It is about the networking and the ability because, if you go to a small junior college, yeah, you're going to learn things. But if you went to Princeton or Yale, you're going to learn things and create lasting connections with people that may end up doing something, you may end up partnering with them to do something amazing or, having a connection that in the future, you guys work on projects or you never know what's going to happen. So that's very true.
Right, exactly. It's all about doing something that it makes logical sense and not just following a pattern. Because if you look at the educational system the way it is today, it's all designed to get people to fit in a particular role so they can work in let's just put little air quotes up, the corporate type of environment, being a cog in a wheel for decades on end. But that world is disappearing.
It really is. And I think that for me, my parents' generation was really the last generation where you're going to have your pension, you're going to retire. My father-in-law worked for the same company for 20, 30 years. And he never followed what he wanted to do. And I know I actually asked my mother-in-law this. I'm like, well, he must have really loved what he did to stay at that company for so long. And she's like, no, it was good money. And I was like, he stayed that long in a place he didn't like because of the money. And, it was funny because by the time he was getting ready to retire, it affected his health and he wasn't happy. And now that he's retired, he's so much happier. And I look at that and I'm like, why? Why would anybody want to do that where they stay in the same job for 30 years that they're not happy at just because of money? And, people think that I'm really weird about this maybe, but, I learned that he wanted to always own a hobby farm and to be a farmer. And he never pursued that because of whatever reason, I'm not sure. Maybe because he felt like he needed to provide for his wife and then his kids and that he wasn't willing to take that kind of risk. But it seems like a really crazy way to live to me.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Where now people have a higher tendency to want to pursue their passions. And you look at some of the younger generations that are just beginning to enter the workforce, where it's more of a mindset, do what's going to be more fulfilling to you, whether it's, let's say, being an artist, whether it's working on a farm, the list goes on, but then that's allowing them to cultivate what they really want to do and then expand in that role. Where if you think about how many more things it's based on how can you live that fulfilled life instead of fulfilling a role in a company. You look at, as an example, the number of people that, let's say they're driving for Uber because it gives them the flexibility to work on a business that they truly want to do.
Yeah, exactly. And, and I will say that, doing your own business is not always for everyone. Right. And, that's okay. If you want to work for someone else, don't feel like, you have to quit and go run out and start a business, because as long as you're following what your talents and your passions are and you're working for someone else, you could love what you're doing and you could never feel that need. But for those of people that do, filling the gaps with things like Uber. And actually my husband has done Uber because it flexes with his school schedule. And my husband actually is going back to school right now. He decided after years of being a stockbroker, which he called a soul-sucking job, that he was going to follow his dreams as a child, and he dreamed of being a doctor. And so at 37, he's going back to school to be a doctor. And he's one of the oldest people in his classes. And he's like, this is kind of weird, but, he likes to do it. And, like I said, he does Uber because it can fit within his schedules. And because when he's sitting around waiting for somebody, he can be studying. Right. And so it's okay to do things like that. Many actresses talk about the horrible jobs that they had before they were an actress, waiting tables or, doing whatever. And so those kind of things are okay, I think, as a temporary stopgap. And I mean, obviously you don't want to be homeless and not have a job. But,
Right.
you need to have goals that you work towards and move towards what your talents are and using them.
Right, exactly. And so critical. You have to do the things that help you towards a goal, because some people, they don't take the time to identify specific goals. Mm-hmm. And then you kind of go wandering through life. How are you helping the people you've worked with establish solid goals to work towards?
Well, one thing about me is I'm a little bit different with goal setting than a lot of people are. And so what I teach people is to make a list of your goals, and you want to make lists of, short-term and long-term goals and life goals. And so when you're working on goals, and a lot of people say, well, I want to do this by, X number date and this by that number date. And that's okay to set dates. But one of the problems that happens is that when you set a definitive date on something and you don't make that date, it creates frustration and it makes you more likely to give up on something that I've found. So what I tell people is that you make your list. So say you're making a goal list for the week, and you put 10 things that you want to get done on the week's list. And by the end of the week, you've only gotten 5 done. You take what's on that list and you move that to the top of the list for next week. And then you start with those items and you kind of keep a rotating goal list. And the same goes for your year and even for your life goals, because I think everything is evolving and that it's easier to be flexible with yourself. And while you have your goals and what you're working on, if you have a detour or something, that that it's okay that I can just reset that goal to the next, week, month, year, and that it's still on my list and then I can still work on it.
Right.
So that, so you don't get easily frustrated with the goals that you set. So I'm a little bit more organic with goal setting.
Well, and believe it or not, that's a solid way to do it, because you hit it on the head. When you try to put a time stamp on a goal that it is an absolute must, this must happen at a certain date and time. Now, granted, certain things you do need to make happen there. Like if you want to, let's say, if you're trying to, let's say, meet a deadline for a competition to enter for something. If that deadline is, let's say, November 1st, well, your goal is it's there. That's not moving.
Yeah.
But when you look at other things that are in your control, because you look at, there's two things. There's things you can control and there's things that you can influence. Your direct actions, well, obviously you can control those. You can get up earlier, you can work longer, you can do all those things there. But the moment you introduce the outside variable of other people, well, now it's an influence. So if someone else takes longer to do it, well, then you might have to reevaluate the time requirement that, because other things took longer, we need to push this deadline back by, let's say, 2 weeks to accommodate for it, or there is another unknown factor that popped up. So
yeah,
you have to look at all those factors.
And absolutely. And, like you said, there are definitely times that you have set times and that you really need to make sure that you meet a set time frame and a set goal. And that's where, making our short-term list, and maybe you're doing your list by the hour or by the day where, okay, today this is what I need to get done to move myself towards the goal of whatever, November 1st. And so that you're continually cycling through and those things that need to get done. So, you get your list done for today and then you move the stuff to tomorrow to the top of the list so that you're constantly cycling the things that need to get done and they're getting done, even if it's not, maybe it's not getting done right at the exact time that you want, or it's not getting done today, but it'll get done first thing tomorrow. And so You're getting those things done in a way that's not overwhelming and frustrating.
Right, exactly. And that's the key. You have to do things in a way that doesn't lead to frustration or overwhelm, because in most cases that causes people to stop in their tracks or their productivity just drops dramatically.
Yeah. And not everybody works that way. Everybody has different ways that work. And this is the way that works for me. And this is the way that I teach people. And I think that's one of the great things is that, it's an important thing too, is that you need to recognize what works for someone else may not always work for you, and what works for you may not always work for someone else, but that, you give it a try and see if that kind of system works. Because, for me, I was getting coaches and people telling me these very rigid systems and, telling me that I have my list and I have to get this done today on the day that that list is made. And I was getting really frustrated and I was getting burnt out because I was staying up till 2, 3 in the morning to finish my list. And then the next morning I'd wake up and I'm exhausted and I wasn't feeling like I could finish my other list. And it was just creating this continual cycle of frustration. And for me, feeling like, oh my gosh, I've failed at my list and I've failed at my goals. And it made me feel like I wasn't able to get things done like I needed to.
Right. And that's so critical. You mentioned that, this long list. The one thing I found helpful was not using a list anymore. It was focusing in on the outcomes. What are the specific outcomes that I want to have for the day? So it's really short. Like for the day, like today with doing podcasts, it's all of the outcomes is simple. Mm-hmm. Record 4 podcast interviews. Mm-hmm. That's it.
Yeah.
All the little things that go along with it, the follow-ups, blah, blah, blah. That's not even there. These are the outcomes. Mm-hmm. So other stuff, those are the tasks. They just kind of go along with it because then it's really simple. I don't think about what if this is not working? If it doesn't, I have a backup plan that I immediately implement. No big deal.
Yeah. And that's a really great way to do it is, okay, I have X number of things to do. And once it's done, okay, anything else is fair game. And, I like that way of working.
Right. And then the other part is that you have, I like to call them bonuses. These are other things like, okay, follow up and things like that. Yeah, I'll throw those in there. But by breaking it down, like, let's say here, like for the day, here's the outcomes and here's my weekly outcomes and monthly. I know I'm always moving in a specific direction because most of the time, what people have identified as goals, they're really just tasks and that's it.
Yeah.
And with tasks, you can get somebody to do a lot of the tasks for you. So focus on what you really need to make happen because then it makes your time more efficient.
Yes, definitely. And I'm actually, what you kind of hit that nail on the head. I actually learned the hard way that you need to have someone else to support you and help you. And you need to learn to delegate tasks, and focus your energies on what you're doing the best. So, I know that like for me, for my consumer products company, I know that I don't have the time or energy to ship packages every day. And so I delegate that task out through a distributor, and my distributor handles shipping and receiving and the customer service involved in shipping product out. And so now I focus my attention more on what I'm really good at, which is sales and marketing and making graphics and social media things. And so it really frees me up to do what I'm talented at. And it's really important to learn that, delegating tasks is not a bad thing.
Right. And, you mentioned something there that you love doing with the posting on social media, the marketing aspects. Mm-hmm. What is it that you find most effective in terms of with your different businesses, with having multiple businesses there? You must see a couple patterns that work really well.
Yeah, well, and it's different with every platform, obviously, and then that's why there's experts on every platform.
Right.
For the biggest thing that I've found is to make connections and to engage with the people on there. If you have something that people are excited and interested about, they'll just organically follow you. So, for instance, and this is I don't know if I mentioned, but back in July, I had pneumonia and I had started a Kickstarter project, and I literally started this project as kind of a joke. I really was like, oh, you could start anything on Kickstarter and, people will buy it, because we were talking about the guy who was selling potato salad. Mm-hmm. And, I said, I bet I could even sell poo on Kickstarter and people would buy it. And my friend was like, oh, I bet you can't. No. It's like, watch me. So I started a project, that was called Unicorn Poop. And it was basically all around selling a little rubber unicorn poo. And we had little t-shirts and fun stuff on it too. And I had gotten sick when right after the project launched. And so I really was not paying attention. And I ended up canceling the Kickstarter because I was like, I can't effectively do this. But in the period of 3 weeks, I ended up with 4,000 Facebook followers. And I was like, okay, this thing that was kind of a joke has turned into a completely new business. And I looked at it and everyone's like, how did you get 4,000 followers in 3 weeks? And I realized I was like, because I created something that people got excited about. And that's, I think, the most important thing, that if you put things out that people get excited and they create an emotional connection with you, whether, the unicorn thing was funny and people laughed at the drawings that I did in the art, and they loved, I made them feel happy. And so that's, I think, how I connected with them. And like my Instagram, I post a lot of videos and philosophical quotes and things like that. And so I create that emotional connection with the people that follow me there. And I think, even for my consumer products company, they want to know the person who's behind what you're doing. And that if you're just a faceless brand, maybe they're going to love your product, but if they start to get to know you, and they're going to love you, and they're going to become these people that not only love you and your products and what you're doing, but they're going to become fans that want to promote and support you. And they're going to start sharing your things. And when they start sharing and commenting, it draws in more people who then also get excited about what you're doing.
Right. And that is so critical, is no matter what it is, to create something that people want, because sometimes that's one step people forget about. Like, I want to do this amazing thing. Did you ask if anybody wants it first? No.
Yeah, it's like the Apple Watch. They created a solution for a problem that didn't exist. And it's, if you're having trouble getting followers on your social media accounts, you need to rethink what you're doing, because people will follow you if what you're doing is something unique and interesting and engaging. So, if you're just doing what everyone else is doing out there, and, and I've seen Instagram after Instagram where it's literally like everybody just posts the same stuff. And I'm like, no one's going to follow you posting the same stuff that everybody else is posting. You need to, and this goes back to discovering your talents, you need to just look at what you are and what you're good at and have your social media reflect that. Because if you're trying to look like everyone else and copy what everyone else is doing, you're not going to stand out in the crowd.
Right. And that is so critical, is to do things to stand out. If people spend their whole lives learning how to be them and becoming an expert at it, why become an amateur now at trying to be something else? Mm-hmm. And that's what so many people end up doing.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, and then you look at the people that are successful, and it does not matter if they're coaches, artists, composers, inventors. It does not matter what you do. It's the people that are true to themselves and that are passionate about what they do and who are willing to stand out from the crowd that are the ones that are most successful. And you really have to be willing to not be what everyone else is. And it's actually really kind of terrifying to stand out from a crowd, because I even go through this where you're like, I'm going to be judged for who I am. And people may or may not like what I have to say. And, that's okay. Because not everyone is going to connect with what you do. Not everyone's going to like whatever product you design, whether it's a physical product or a digital product. If you're a musician, not everyone's going to like the same music that you play, right?
Right.
But you will connect if you're doing what you do best and not trying to copy and imitate people, you will connect with the right people. And those people will become your fan base, your tribe, your group. And, it's okay if everybody doesn't like what you do. It's good to be
Right.
different.
Exactly. Because at the end of the day, no matter how much you want to service the world and affect a large number of lives, there's not a single person in the world who is directly influencing 7+ billion people. There's not a single business that services all of them. No matter how much some might try, they're not doing it. Mm-hmm. The reality comes down to is to have an amazing lifestyle, you only need a small percentage or fraction of a percentage of the Earth's population to have an amazing lifestyle. Mm-hmm. And it's defining who that audience is.
It's so absolutely true. My cloth diaper company, I think that our market share is maybe 3%. Mm-hmm. And I have a business that's valued over $2 million with the 3%. So you don't have to be for everyone. You just have to be for you. And people will follow that if you're true to who you are.
Right, exactly. It's just a matter of the more true you are to something, you're going to attract the right people. Mm-hmm. So as we're wrapping up everything, what is one thing you would recommend people to do to unleash their inner genius?
One thing that I would recommend that people could go out and do today, I think is, and we touched on this a lot, is to put aside what you've been told. And to really recognize that we are all born with talents and we all have abilities, and discovering your talents is just the first step on a winding path of self-discovery. And, once you discover your talents should become something that should never be ignored and always be developed. And so I would say that you should take your talents, if you know what your talent is, to go out and develop that and to work on it further, to sign up, for a class or something that will help you develop that talents. And it's easy to forget when you see someone else who's really talented that they put a lot of time and effort into those developing those talents. And you have to remember that, they say it takes 10,000 hours to become an expert, and I would venture to say it takes 20,000 hours to become a master. So don't let the time involved of developing your genius put you off. Don't say, well, it's going to take, like my husband, it's going to take another 5 years of school to become a doctor. That's okay. If that's what you're passionate about, start the process of developing that talent. And you can start that today.
Exactly. Because regardless, between now and 5 years, that time is going to pass. It's up to you to decide how you're going to have the time pass.
Exactly. And, my husband put off medical school for 8 years. He knew 8 years ago he wanted to be a doctor, and he kept making excuses after excuse. I can't do it because of this. And, finally he said, you know what? This is it. I have to do this, and I need to do this now. And so he turned it into, okay, it doesn't matter. I'm just going to start. And, he's almost done with his first semester now. And so he's one step closer. And, it's like climbing a ladder. You can't expect to get to the top of the ladder without climbing each and every rung.
Right.
And it's okay, that it's going to take time, but don't put it off. Do something today to say, like, okay, I'm really talented at this, and I'm going to do something right now that's going to start the process of developing that talent. Because like I said before, each of us are blessed with talents. Everyone is born with talents. Everyone is born with the ability to be a genius. And it's not always what the world quantifies as a genius, or, you're not going to maybe be the person that wins a Nobel Prize, but you have that genius, and the talents you've been given, whether they're personal, artistic, creative, they're unique to you. And you need to use your gifts to bring your talents, your light, your joy to the world, because your talents are uniquely you and the world needs those.
Right. Definitely. So now how can people learn more from you and reach out to you?
Oh, absolutely. So we're really active on social media. You can find us on Facebook at Your Girl Genius, Instagram at Your Girl Genius, or you can go to girlgeniusinventors.com, and we have all the links to all our social media and everything on there. If they want to chat with me, I have free 15-minute and 30-minute talent discovery calls. And I'm not a sales pitchy type person, so I'll literally just get on the phone with you and talk to you about your talents and help you work through them. And there's also a lot of fun freebies on the website for developing your talents. Discover your genius, and if you've already discovered your talents, there's the idea guide of how to come up with an idea based on your talents to turn something into something great.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, I want to thank you for coming onto the Big Movement podcast today, as you shared so much wisdom in wide areas, all about being a genius.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a lot of fun.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thanks for listening to the Big Movement Podcast today. And be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Now that you've surely been inspired to take your entrepreneurial career and business to the next level, you can stop by the website and get more. And if you're ready to boost your business brand, be sure to grab your free report, 7 Easy Steps to Build Your Brand Today.